Hey friends, today I want to talk about Burnham. He is a comedian, storyteller, songwriter, and he recently released a special on Netflix called Inside, which has kind of reverberated a lot. And I'm actually not going to talk about Inside specifically, but ever since I saw that, there's been a lot of discussion around his work, which talks about a lot of different things, addresses many different topics. But one of the things Bo Burnham talks about a lot is kind of the impact on social media on our lives and how it has sort of created this very strange experience that we live in. And there was this interview that he had done a few years ago, not in the special, but a few years ago, after another movie he had made, another film that he had directed and written in. And he was being asked about this, about social media, and there's this line that he said, I would have liked to put the video in, but there'll probably be some copyright thing. So I'll just quote it and link to it. But the quote goes something like this, what is the feeling of walking through your life and not just living your life, which is already, difficult, very, very hard, but taking inventory of life, being a viewer of your own life, living and experiencing at the same time, hovering behind yourself and watching yourself live that experience. So being a viewer, being nostalgic for moments that haven't happened yet, planning your future to look back on it. Those are really weird, strange, dissociative things that I think are new because of the specific structure of social media and the way it disassociates ourselves from ourselves. That's the quote. So when I heard that, it really kind of made me think, and it gave me a lot of thoughts, and I've been thinking about it since, so I wanted to just do a video to talk out loud and hear myself talk about this, which I think is the most ironic way to engage with this topic because I'm here on a form of social media talking about it. But I actually think it's also an authentic way to do it, because I think the first thing that it made me think about, that line that says being nostalgic for moments that haven't happened yet, planning your future to look back on it, it made me think about how a lot of times when we're living our lives, we're kind of imagining how we're going to narrate them. So you're here, you're having this moment, but you're already thinking about how you're going to talk about it later. You're thinking about, what's the story I'm going to tell? What's the picture I'm going to paint of this moment? And you're still in the moment. The moment hasn't even passed yet. And so you're in this sort of half-present mode. If you're somebody who's really posting a lot on Instagram, back maybe not as much these days, but you would think about, what's the picture going to look like? What's the caption going to be? What's the tweet thread I'm going to do of this? Or what's the TikTok, or whatever it is. And so it's important for us to recognize, what is the impact of that on our daily experiences. We want to be present. We want to be where we are. But it's very difficult sometimes. And I think the reason it's difficult, it's not necessarily to do with, okay, well, I've left that social network, so I don't really check so-and-so anymore. I think that sometimes what can happen is that, behavior and psychology, the psychological impacts of said behavior can affect our mindset. So I kind of feel like, if you just get used to, day after day, year after year of living a moment and then just talking about it, you're just trained now to want to know, what's the narrative of this? And then we start to judge experiences beforehand based on that. So the extreme of this, as you probably have experienced this at different points, like you go to certain events that seem like their entire purpose is purely to be narrated. The Instagram party, or if you will. So what I find interesting personally is that there was a period in my life, shortly after going through some, startup founder burnout. I'll just sort of pause it there, but that's kind of what happened. And I took kind of a involuntary sabbatical, let's say. And it took, a lot of time by myself. I was meditating a lot. I was reading a lot. I was learning a lot. And at that time, I actually did not have any online presence, really. I wasn't really active on Twitter. I wasn't writing. There was no newsletter. There was no essays. There was no YouTube channel. There's no videos. And I remember doing a lot of stuff just because. That actually was when I started drawing, which now, my illustrations have kind of come along, and I'm actually writing a book of fables, and the illustrations help with that. But I didn't know that then. I was just kind of doing them, and I thought that was fine. I think, so I'm trying to contrast the fact that when I really, really, truly wasn't participating in a social network or at all, or online, I really wasn't much online. I wasn't going through this. I wasn't sort of narrating and planning and plotting every moment of my experience. So I do think we can escape. At the same time, I'm now, in my present moment, what you might call very online. I've heard that term, like extremely online. Like, I probably reduced it a little bit, but, I write online. I have a regular newsletter. I tweet. I publish these videos. So it's a lot. It's a lot of narrating. And I often channel my own experiences. And I would say overall, it's a good thing for me. It's been a good thing. I've learned a lot about myself. I've kind of developed skills that allow me to do things that are fun, but also meaningful. I've made a lot of new friends. I've been able to connect with people at deeper levels. I've learned how to have the confidence to kind of even record a video like this. It is kind of hard to record videos or write or do things like that. There's such a strong narrative, like, who cares what you think? Like, no one wants to know. I'm not even sure I've necessarily gotten over that. I've just kind of like done it enough times that there was some kind of feedback usually, and that would keep me going. But broadly speaking, I would say these are good things. So knowing that participating online, being online, it has positives for me, and then also knowing that there are these pretty significant sort of disassociation or other related consequences to participating in social media. How do you balance that is kind of what I'm thinking about, Of course, like, being online doesn't necessarily mean social media. I'm online in certain writing forums and small private groups and things like that, but it's increasingly hard to like separate all these communities and say, okay, this community is like this and that community is a public community. It all starts to sort of blend together. Just like, my life sort of starts to blend together, where like, okay, I'm talking about stuff online, I'm writing, is this work? Am I working right now? I don't know. It doesn't feel like it. It feels comfortable. And so another thing that I try to think about is, what impact does constantly performing have on me as a person? So let's say someone, you might present the argument, well, social media trains you to like talk a certain way and perform. And that turns you into someone who performs to get that feedback, to get that engagement. I think that's an interesting question to explore, because I don't think it's as simple as like, that is bad. Uh, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to be alone. We want to connect with others, and knowing how to articulate yourself in a way that connects with others, it's a net good, I think. How do you know when you are performing? How do you know when you've allowed the authentic self of you to show up? Like, is it authentic of me to say, oh, this is the real me talking now? Can I do that? Can I, or is it more authentic for me to say, listen, I know that the camera's on. I know it is. And so I'm talking to you in a way that acknowledges that, acknowledges the truth of my environment. So increasingly, I feel like I don't really want to participate in a life where I completely disconnect from all of these online places. Instead, I want to like learn what's the right way to show up. What's the right, well, not the right way, but like, what's the most fulfilling way? What's the most enjoyable way? What's the healthiest way that I can show up? And, I think that's the question we kind of have to ask ourselves is like, in each of these platforms, of which there are more and more, that's another thing that happens is you get sort of overwhelmed with all these different platforms and communities. And so you have to think about, where do I show up? When do I show up? And am I really present when I show up? I feel like increasingly what I want to do is show up in less places, but show up more in the places that I do show up. I want to come in, if I come in to a call or a video call or a coffee meeting, I want to really be there. And usually what that means is afterward, it lasts like a couple hours and then I'm just done. I'm beat. I don't have the capacity to go and check in on that Slack and go respond to these messages here. And that's the trade-off. But I think the premise that kind of all of social media is training us to be much more disconnected from our experiences is probably true depending on how you're using those platforms. And I think the way to still participate in them and still get the benefits of connection without being sucked in is like relying on awareness. Like I have to rely on my awareness to notice, okay, what am I doing right now? Am I actually here? Which is kind of funny because you kind of have to disconnect and observe your thoughts to observe whether you're being, if you're kind of lost in the future, you have to kind of watch yourself. I don't know if, you know what I'm, like, what I mean by that is sometimes you're sitting there and you're kind of like running this loop of this movie of the future. And in this movie, it's something Bo Burnham talks about, where you do things so that you can go home at night and watch yourself and be satisfied with what you see, which is, and increase, what do you suggest? If you can live life kind of without an audience, then try and do that. And that's where I wrestle with. Like I think that's true. I do think you want to live life without an audience if you can, but by audience, I almost feel like, yeah, you don't want to be a stage performer, but sometimes you need to take the stage. I was talking to someone who was sort of afraid or sort of unsure is the word I would use of why should I share? Why? Who cares what I have to say? Why should I share? Why do I have this compulsion to share? And the way I was trying to phrase it was, there's an author named Elizabeth Gilbert whose work I adore. One of the things she says is, when you have a certain talent or passion or knowledge or wisdom and you don't share it, it's kind of like pain. It's like holding on to it. And so we do have this compulsion to share. We want to go up and post our stuff and say our words. And part of the reason is to satisfy that inner desire, but the other reason is to connect with others, because a lot of times there may be others who have the same pain as you, but they don't have the ability to articulate it the way you do. And so they're kind of waiting for someone else to, so they can see it and say, oh my God, I feel seen. I'm not alone. And that's a beautiful thing, that's a privilege. So I guess the main takeaway I would say is I think we need to move past kind of narratives that like social media is bad. Like, oh, it's all bad. It's not, you know. It's there's nuance, right? And that's where the interesting discussions come into play, is because it's a part of our reality now. It's a really significant part of the infrastructure of the way that we live. And we have to learn how to kind of manage that and navigate that. And we haven't really been taught that. So we kind of have to learn and teach ourselves, try different things. So that's kind of the experiment that I'm trying to figure out, is how much online is too much. Well, thanks for listening. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear how you think about this and how you want to show up. Wishing you well. Leave a comment. See you next time.